Here. Today we're presented with Master Eric White from the NJHFA. And to begin, I would like to have a quote, to present a quote. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. It's by the Roman philosopher Seneca. Master Eric, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
A little introduction about yourself. You're the head of the NJHFA as a whole, but if you would like to tell us a little more about your previous experience with training,
Sure.
as well as other things.
So I've been involved in martial arts for 29 years. I started with Isshin-ryu karate and ran that out to its basically natural conclusion for myself and wanted to see more, and found historical fencing in 2006. Started training in that pretty seriously, and I've just never looked back. So historical fencing has basically been my bread and butter for 16, 17 years.
Yeah, so that's a long time. And 27 years of karate, you said?
Well, I did karate for 15 years. There's a bit of overlap where I was trying to fade out of karate and get into historical fencing.
Okay.
So there was some overlap there.
All right, I see.
Yeah.
I see, but altogether a life of training for about 30-something years.
Yeah, it's almost 30 years, which blows my mind, sure.
Yeah. Time goes fast.
It does.
When would you say it was when you first started training?
So I first started training with my sensei Doug King in Isshin-ryu karate when I was 14 years old.
14.
Yeah. Actually, I was 13 years old. It was summer of 7th grade. I had a buddy who got me into martial arts, which is the way a lot of people get into martial arts, right? Their friends drag them in, and I just never left.
Oh, nice. Along your journey, what would you describe, because you're an English teacher as well, right? You're a 9th grade English teacher?
Right now, and for the last maybe 10 years or so, I've been a 12th grade.
12th grade, sorry, senior.
It's okay, yeah.
So, and you said 12 years of teaching.
So this is now my 19th year of teaching English at the high school level. And I've been teaching martial arts since I got my black belt in 1997. So I've been involved in teaching itself for quite some time.
Yeah, teaching as a whole seems to be your passion.
It is.
In the broad perspective of your journey, how would you describe discipline?
It's a broad question, right? Discipline takes a lot of different forms because the way or the reason why people get into martial arts varies. Many people do martial arts sometimes just for the workouts, right? It's just for the calisthenics and such to get fitter. Some people join martial arts because they want to see what they can do physically. Some people join martial arts because, to be quite honest, they're afraid and they want to see a way in which they can actually stop being afraid. How can you increase your confidence where you don't have to be afraid around people anymore? And some, for historical fencing, for example, just are really interested in history. So there are so many different reasons to get into martial arts that discipline itself is essentially attached to all those different reasons. So discipline has to be looked at through the lens of each one. However, if I were to broaden it out, I think discipline is being honest with yourself about what you want to accomplish. So if, for example, you set a goal, and you say to yourself, if I use historical fencing as an example, I want to become very fluid with a particular cut. Well, that goal requires very specific actions that you have to do to arrive to that goal. And so discipline is whatever you set yourself as far as repetitive actions, right? The schedule that you set yourself to accomplish the goal that you have in mind. And so what I try to do as a teacher is I try to understand what most people want out of the martial art, because you can very easily see some people are just in it for the fun and they could care less about rank structure, for example, while others really care about rank structure. Rank means something to them because of what it symbolizes and such. Those are just two examples. So playing with that as a teacher is important because that helps you to understand as a teacher which way do you need to direct someone and to then hopefully help to instill the discipline that they want rather than need, the discipline they want to get the goal that they have. So that's the way in which I think of discipline. It really is a stepping stone or the stepping stone to get to a goal.
I see. Very well said. I agree with you on that. Every person is guided with certain different motives.
Sure.
And once we understand their own motives, then we can use that to help them develop in whichever way they want.
Yeah, exactly. And mature is a really good word for it, right? Because the idea of discipline in any art is the idea that you are maturing in the acquisition of skill towards your goal, right? You're maturing by progressing, hopefully. And every little increment that you progress, you start to see the goal more clearly. It's not so far on the horizon anymore as you get closer and closer to it, right? And oftentimes the discipline starts building from those small successes. You'll see the discipline solidify more, which is really beautiful to see. Yeah.
I agree with you that small successes part is like small wins attached over time, over the years.
Yeah.
And you brought us to the next question, which will be a skill acquisition, whether it's in martial arts or whether it's trying to learn something. What would you think is a part of skill acquisition, or what helps skill acquisition?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think skill acquisition has to be tied to vision. So if someone's going to get better at something, they have to have a very clear understanding as to what that something is they're trying to aim at. If the vision is foggy or unclear, if the end goal is unclear, the skill acquisition is not going to solidify in any way, right? The skill acquisition is going to be impeded, probably even, by a lack of vision. So I try to focus very heavily on what does, in martial arts specifically, for example, what does it look like for one to have an understanding, a whole understanding of the art itself that they're trying to embody, that they're trying to utilize. And once that vision, I think, is clear, most people then have an understanding on how to acquire the skills that they need, as long as the drills are towards that goal, as long as the exercises that are set out for them are towards that goal. They can start to make the connections, really, I guess, between the different skills in order to realize the vision itself. And so skill acquisition has to start with a clear vision. It has to.
A clear goal and whatever we're willing to pay to get to that goal.
Right, absolutely. And the goal too, though, the goal almost is a smaller subset of the vision itself, because clearly in a long tenure at martial arts, or in any pursuit really, any craft or art, the goals can change, right? You can acquire or get to a goal and then say, well, guess what? The horizon still exists out there. There's still something to achieve. And that's why some people can stay in martial arts or in any craft or art for a very long time, because there's just the continuous and never-ending or perennial goal setting that goes on, right? And the skill acquisition is part of the goal setting, but it has to be with this overall vision of what, martial arts, what fluid movement can be like. What does it feel like when one actually accurately self-defends, when one defends oneself? What does that feel like? That has to all be part of the vision, and that vision, therefore, is instrumental in being able to not only identify the skills that need to be attained to reach that vision, but then number two, how do you train to get those skills to reach that vision, right? So they all really work hand in hand, all those components.
Will you say that action is the main thing towards skill acquisition? After you make your goal, then you have to act, and it's the constant action that allows us to get there.
Right, absolutely. No matter the art is embodied work, always embodied, right? So our bodies have to be active in some shape or form. You can talk about music, playing a musical instrument. You can talk about drawing and painting, right? You talk about martial arts, obviously. The embodiment of the art is exactly how one learns it. You can't learn an art by sitting in a chair reading a book, although historical fencing does that quite often, right? But that's only one part of our art, for example. We read historical books, but then we try to take what we read and embody it, and that's the only way in which you can learn anything.
Yes, using the old mentorships, per se, of all masters in order to progress and use that ourselves.
Exactly.
So, along your journey, I would say close to 30 years, you say. How old you say? Or will you be, if you don't mind me asking?
So I'm 42 years old,
42.
and I've almost been training for 30 years.
Yeah, close to 30 years. Yeah. So along that journey, I bet there were times in which discipline was demanded of you in order not to, say, pursue lust, say, whether it's entertainment, right, or just going out with friends, things like that, in which you had to say, this will drag me away from my goal.
Right.
Do you think that in your life, has that happened?
Oh, many times. I was just thinking as you were asking the question about the ways in which I oftentimes spent my Friday nights as a high schooler. Many people were out partying, and I was down in my basement training a lot. But that was eons ago, and it really feels like another lifetime ago. But even more recently, I have a family, I have a wife and 2 daughters, and I have to learn how to partition my time, because I obviously want to be with my family, but at the same time, I have to recognize that if I don't train, I'm never going to get better, A, and then B, I'm never going to help my students get better as well, which is what I really see as my primary goal at this point of my life. So discipline has to be an aspect of the training, because life can very easily sweep you away. It can sweep you away from the training every single moment if you allow it to do so. At some point you have to draw the line in the sand and just say, no, I'm not allowing this to sweep me away. I'm going to train. And that takes sacrifice. And when you have a family, for example, it actually takes sacrifice from just about everyone in the family, because you're going to be absent. You're going to be gone. But that has to be something that you can reconcile and deal with and allow for, while at the same time recognizing it's for a really important and beneficial reason. So discipline is absolutely fundamental there.
Yeah, discipline helps with the structure, as you say, and a good support group also helps. Having that at home
it's vital.
really helps.
It is.
Next question will be about Spring. Now that we come, this will be the 6th year Spring has come?
So Spring X started in 2015.
All right.
So I think this is the 8th or 9th year, something like that. But we had the blip in 2020, like everybody else, because of COVID.
Yeah, so my memory gets messed up with the years.
Yeah.
So if you could give us a history of Spring, how it became to be?
Sure. So Spring X is basically a training event. It's the best way to bill it. There are a lot of tournaments in historical fencing, in HEMA, and tournaments are important. However, they're not the entirety or breadth of the art. There's a lot more of the art to explore, and training with other people who you don't normally train with, the people who are outside of your school or your local club, give you an incredible amount of feedback when you're training, because the folks who you're with in your club all the time, you know how they fight, you know how they move, and it's wonderful, and the camaraderie is amazing. But man, to get it into a ring with someone who you've never fenced before, with the competitive element out of it, where you can communicate back and forth. You say, you cracked me up the head really good. How did you do that? And just have a conversation, and to learn from one another, rather than that competitive side where, oftentimes at least, there's no conversation at all, right? Because there's an opponent and then there's you, and that doesn't usually allow for any kind of conversation or learning together. You can learn certainly in a tournament when you get hit upside the head if you're self-reflective on what happened, but there's no collaboration usually. So in the training event of Spring X, we try to bring many people together from different clubs to collaborate and train together. That's the overall idea of it.
So an exchange of knowledge through combat,
exactly,
instead of just a competition to see who is the winner for the day.
Right, exactly. So we do have some competitive elements in Spring X. We have what's called a prizing. A prizing is basically a rank test. In a prizing, someone's going to fence basically everyone else who's there in order to demonstrate the art to the best of his or her ability. And the prizing is not competitive in the sense that there's going to be a medal at the end, but at the end of a prizing is a rank. A rank is awarded. The prize that we have at Spring X this year is actually for provost. So the provost rank is basically the equivalent of a black belt level, if you wanted to try to make an analogy to Asian martial arts. And so there is some competitiveness to that, but at the end of the day, the participants at Spring X don't want to hurt the prizer, the person who's going for their rank, and the prizer surely doesn't want to hurt the participants. In a tournament, sometimes whether or not you hurt the other person is secondary. Scoring the point is the primary goal, right? Not hurting the person is certainly a primary at a training event like Spring X. So it's a very different feel. Yeah,
and we are inviting 2 schools, right? From Wisconsin. That'll be Master Jeremiah's school and Master Pinneberg's school.
Yeah. So I learned from Master Jeremiah Backhaus and Master Aaron Pinneberg, both out in Wisconsin, Wisconsin Historical Fencing Association, and they are bringing students with them to come to Spring X. Master Aaron Pinneberg, in fact, is not going to be here this year, but one of his students is certainly going to be coming this year. PJ Stahl, great fighter. And so we try to coordinate. So Jeremiah Bachhaus and Aaron Pinberg and I basically coordinate on what does a rank structure look like? How do we want our classes to run? What is the culture that we want to foment and create in our martial arts clubs? And I've been on this martial arts journey with them for over a decade now, and I wouldn't want to be with anyone else. We have a very similar value system, a very similar delivery system. We take the art seriously, but not ourselves seriously, right? So the way in which we approach things are very similar. So it's really nice to be able to collaborate with them, and I'm looking forward to seeing their students.
Yeah, it's always been fun. I've only been at Spring the last 3 years, and it's always fun. You always learn
Great.
something.
Great.
It's like going to another dojo comes to us, per se.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
And I know we have class here, so it's almost 7 o'clock. So just to close this with another quote, before I get to it, you guys, a few weeks ago, you told us that you were going to talk with Master Jeremiah and I keep saying Jeremiah and Backhouse. It's Master Jeremiah and Backhouse and Pinenberg, about what is the definition of the word of the rank master.
Yeah.
Right. So
we're gonna do this. We're gonna do this fast, right?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
The only reason I say is because this is a really contentious topic, so it's kind of funny that we're gonna do this really quickly, right? The rank of master is a historical rank. Quite a few traditions, historical fencing traditions, have the rank of master in them. But it's obviously contentious because we have a modern setting that is clearly a break from when these arts were utilized in actual combat or utilized in a duel situation. And so there are very legitimate questions as to whether or not our art can, now in a modern day practice, or someone in a modern day practice can be considered a master. So there's some legitimate questions here. I think the answer in short is yes. We certainly can have masters in a modern day practice of historical fencing, and I think we also should have masters. Now, the real crux of this is, well, what is a master? And to be quite honest with you, a master very simply is someone who heads a school. Someone who leads a club is the master. It does not mean they are infallible. They can certainly be proven wrong, and a master should allow himself or herself to be proven wrong if the evidence is very clear in front of him or her. But a master doesn't have to be the greatest fighter in the room, and I think that's one of the major misconceptions of what a master is. The master's job is to teach. That's what the word means, in fact, right? It means instructor or teacher. And so the master has to just take that into consideration as the primary role. And once you jettison ego and you jettison trying to be the greatest fighter in the role, it's very easy to see that if you're focused on pedagogy, you're focused on drills and exercises, you're focused on how to create a really wonderful culture where people can use those exercises and drills to learn, then absolutely, you're the master of the club. It's actually rather simple. It doesn't mean anything more than that. So we do have the rank of master, and it's something that I think should hopefully spread in the wider world of HEMA.
Miyamoto Musashi actually calls it the state of no ego, in the point in which a swordsman evolves into the next stage. So with that, I would like to end the quote, which really made me think about when you guys said that, and what you made me, because I always refer to you as Master Eric. It is.
You do it. It's not required.
Yeah, I know. It is a position for myself in which I know I become a student to somebody else, and it is my honor to become the student.
Well, it's my honor to teach you. So,
thank you.
So
I
you're a
appreciate
fantastic student.
So I know it's already 7 o'clock. We're about to start, so sorry if we're rushing this. But it's a quote by Gus D'Amato, in which I should truly believe it reflects your characteristics as a master. He talks about making fire out of fear. But the way I look at it is making fire out of curiosity.
Yeah.
So he says a student comes to him with a spark. He feeds the spark till it becomes a flame. Then he feeds the flame till it becomes a blaze. Then he feeds that blaze until it becomes a raging tornado. What I believe that comes to us is the ability of the master to create the wish, the desire within the student of self-development, constant self-development.
Sure.
And I think you exemplify that perfectly. I think everybody here, as goes through your classes, comes out with that inner desire of the self-development, learning more, learning how you talk about learning martial arts frees our bodies, like knowledge frees us, right?
Absolutely.
That constant grind for self-development. I think you truly allow that spark to become a flame and a bigger flame within each one of us. So I think that's what, in my special opinion, from my years of training and just being under people, I think that's what describe you as a master. That I constantly call you Master Eric, because I believe that you use that flame within people for their own self-development in order to make it the best that they can be.
Well, thank you.
So for that, I really thank you.
Well, it's important just to add there, because I love the analogy. I love feeding that fire, but at the same time, you need to get out of the way, right? So you need to get out of the way of the fire and let it grow itself. So that's an important aspect of being a teacher, is to feed it, but then let the person expand. Let them go beyond where you have gone, and that is probably the greatest gift a student can ever give a teacher. And to go beyond what the teacher, in fact, knows, to surpass him or her. It's fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and this is something I've heard from many students, many who have become world athletes. And Louis Simmons, who you know from Westside Barbell, is a huge mentor to me. He always talks about it as a teacher who always makes his students better than himself.
Right.
Should always strive for that.
Absolutely.
And it is the teacher who gets afraid that the students become better than him, that doesn't truly become a master in his craft. You know, and I think what you just said, I think it describes it perfectly. It's you feed us, we develop a little bit, you feed us some more, because we constantly come back to your questions, and then you allow us to keep growing without really pampering us and be like, oh well, this will work, but no, you give us an analogy or a circumstance a circumstance in which the action might not work.
Sure.
Right? So we can look at it from a different eye.
Yeah.
So that definitely has helped us a lot.
Oh, great. I'm glad it has, and you're a fantastic student, so you make it easy.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Eric. I really hope this will be the first of many interviews that we can have, many small talks we can have together.
Yeah, I enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
No problem. And thank you guys. The link for the NJHFA will be at the bottom. The links for Springer will be at the bottom, as well as the other schools. I strongly suggest you come here. There is a lot of things you can learn about yourselves through this. All right, thank you, and take care.